Hello, and welcome to another teaching from TorahFamily.org. We are a family-based ministry that believes the whole Bible stands forever, that all of it is based in the Torah, and all of it promotes the Torah. Please visit us at TorahFamily.org for more teachings like this one. We hope this teaching helps you learn and grow in the faith. Men of Yahweh, Chapter 17, Arrows. Do you value your children? Of course you do. But how do you show it? Above the responsibility of providing for your children, how do you show you value them? How do we view our children? As a nuisance or as an asset? It's easy for us to forget that diamonds don't come out of the ground the way we see them on jewelry. They have to go through a lot to look like the final products we see in the stores. The problem is that most of us would probably not even recognize diamonds in their natural uncut state. We would most likely pass right over them. In many cases, if left in their natural state, they could easily be looked right over as regular rocks at a passing glance. But if someone has a trained eye for it, they will notice them right away. And let it be known, I believe that is our responsibility as parents. That being, to see the potential in our children. But to not just see their potential, but to make that potential come to pass in their lives. I've seen many times where a parent knew their child had potential in something, but they never nourished that potential. They just let it be to grow on its own. Now, can it develop on its own? Sure, but how well will it turn out in the end if left alone? If you know your child is gifted in a specific area, I personally believe it is your obligation as the parent to cultivate that gift in your child. Many other times, I've seen where parents forced their children into something that their children not only had no desire for, but also had no inclination of ability. Ignoring a gift or pushing the wrong one can have negative consequences either way. Sometimes it can be a fine line to tread with knowing what and what not to do for our children. Welcome to parenthood. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it." This isn't a cookie-cutter type upbringing. Every child is different. Any parent with multiple children will confess how each of their children is different. Even though they have the same parents, the same environment, the same everything. It doesn't matter. Every child is different, and the parent needs to use wisdom in knowing how each child needs to be cultivated individually, the way they should go. Now, just as each child will have their talents and gifts we need to assist in developing, each child will have their challenges to overcome as well. I'm talking in the form of behavior, attitudes, lack of obedience, and even rebellion. Again, every child is different. Thus, we need to address each one differently in these areas as well. This is why we see these words from Paul to the Ephesians. Ephesians 4:4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. You see, we can't expect our children to respond the same way to all correction. We need to seek wisdom in what works for each child. While some will respond well to a specific form of correction, others may ignore it and test you. So, what should we do when they test us? Do we just let them get away with it? Well, we all know what Yahweh did to Israel when they tested him over and over. It didn't turn out too well for them. It's when our children test us that it really becomes difficult. It's at that moment we should let the words of David ring in our hearts. Psalm chapter 6, verse 1. O Yahweh, do not rebuke me in your anger, or discipline me in your wrath. Please, don't ever punish your children in anger. It can lead to that punishment going over the top. That could be the very thing that angers your children that Paul was referencing, that being punishing them too hard. This isn't always easy. However, it's something we should keep at the forefront of our minds. This doesn't mean we shouldn't discipline our children. It just means we shouldn't punish them in our anger. If you let your children disrespect you now through disobedience, don't be surprised to see the love they show you turn into disdain when they don't need you for food or a roof over their head. As a former youth minister, I can't tell you how many times I've talked with frustrated parents just wanting to throw their hands in the air and give up, constantly browbeating themselves and wondering where they went wrong and wondering how one of their children could have gone astray. This should humble every single parent. Why? Because we know none of us have all the answers, and we can only hope and pray that we'll never be in that situation ourselves. Exactly why one child will rebel while the others remain faithful is yet to be fully known. Oh, sure, there'll be theories and opinions from professionals, but as I noted earlier, all children are different. Period. We can't slap some one-size-fits-all solution on it. That being said, you still can't let your child get away with disrespecting you. If that's allowed now, those seeds will eventually grow up and come to fruition later in life. I have personally seen examples where parents let their child disrespect them and get away with it. Those same children had trouble with other authority later in life. They even ended up in jail, and one eventually got mixed up in the wrong crowd and was found murdered. He was a young man who had so much potential. It was a sad day indeed. And please don't say, that'll never happen with my child. None of us are immune to mistakes. None of us can predict what our children will choose. None of us can say with absolute surety what tomorrow holds. And I can promise you, the parents of that young man would have never guessed their son to have such a tragic fate. Now, multiple scenarios surround every different situation. I get that. However, I can say with confidence, one common denominator with almost all cases will be that of disrespect for authority, something that almost always starts in the home. So, what does one do with a child that persists in challenging their authority? Well, I wish there was an easy answer to that. I really do. But just as much as you can't let it go unpunished, giving a harsher punishment can work to the negative just the same. Ultimately, I believe it comes down to seeking the Father for the wisdom of what that individual child needs. But if there is one thing I'm convinced should be done, it's to never lose your cool when dealing with them. When you lose control of your emotions because of their actions, they will learn how to control you. Even if it's only in their subconscious that they realize this, it's still making them in charge of you. So, when it comes right down to it, never lose your cool. Always be in control with what I call the 3 C's: calm, cool, and collective. But I don't want to leave you with nothing to offer. There are things we can and should do. Now, I don't want to repeat any of our previous lessons, so I want to present a different perspective, a perspective in how we should view our children as we try our best to raise them in a world that is growing ever darker. What perspective is that? The view of Psalm 127. Psalm 127, verses 3 through 5. Behold, children are a heritage from Yahweh, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. I've heard this verse quoted many times in how our children are arrows in our quiver, and I can agree with that. However, I believe this needs to be taken to the next level. Now, you're probably wondering, how can this be taken to the next level? You see, verse 4 says, like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Children are likened as arrows in the hand of a warrior. So, the question is, are you being the warrior? Your children need you to be that warrior for them to be the arrows in your quiver. Changes the perspective, doesn't it? Suddenly, we realize it's up to us to be the warriors Yahweh has called us to be in order to make them arrows. A warrior will never go into battle empty-handed. He will always take his weapon of choice, a weapon with which he has done his due diligence to prepare. So, here are a few thoughts to consider that may help us all in preparing our children. First, I believe we need to properly identify them. Now you might be saying, Steve, what do you mean by that? Well, I mean they are children, not kids. Where did we get the practice of calling our children kids? Kids are young goats. So when and where did the practice of calling our children goats come from? I mean, think about it. We know the scriptures talk much about the Hebrews falling to the practices of foreign gods, practices that included them sacrificing their children to those gods. It was a detestable practice that infuriated Yahweh. Though we would never think of doing such a thing today, why are we calling our children after animals that were often used as sacrifices? We all know that words mean something. So maybe, just maybe, we should start by not referencing our children as animals. Though there may be times when they want to act like animals, we have to remember they're going to be more than what they are right now. And that all starts in the mind. So let's start working on not referencing our children as animals. Let's show them respect and call them what they are. Our children. Our arrows. Since we see the scriptures reference our children as arrows, we as the warriors are to sharpen them. So, are you sharpening your children? I have a crossbow, and I remember when I bought the bolts for it. I saw the tips were just regular tips. So, I saved up and bought 3-point razor tips. Now, the bolts will be more effective. Plus, now they look cool. So, are we giving the extra effort to sharpen our children the same way? Are we utilizing everyday life for teaching moments? Are we going out of our way to make teaching moments just the same? We can't expect our children to be above average if we aren't doing our part to make it happen. What are we doing to sharpen our children? Since every child is different, pray for wisdom for the best way to sharpen them individually. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 10. If the axe is dull and its edge unsharpened, more strength is needed, but skill will bring success. May we always do our best to give our children the skills they need to make them successful in Yahweh. But not only should we sharpen the arrows Yahweh has given us, we should also protect them as well. Just as I protect the bolts to my crossbow, I have to protect my children even more so. So pray over them. But don't just pray for them. Pray over them. Speak life into them. Speak hope into them. Be cautious in referencing them in a derogatory way. Avoid cutting them down. Let even your words of correction be mixed with a confidence that they can do better. Plus, we need to guard who we let them hang out with and teach them why. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, "Don't be misled. bad company corrupts good character. Now, this isn't isolated to just people. Music and TV can be bad influences just the same. What do we allow in our children's lives for our convenience? Don't let the enemy mess with your arrows. Let me say that again. Don't let the enemy mess with your arrows. They are your responsibility. So, as I asked at the beginning, do you value your children? I know you do. Sharpen them. Protect them. Be the warrior Yahweh has called you to be and making them the arrows in your quiver. We hope you have enjoyed this teaching. Now, it's up to you to be a Berean and study it for yourself. That's the only way to grow. Until next time, Shalom.